often said that a courtroom is the first place of reflection, where even the most notorious offenders reflect on their devious acts. But we assure you, not all reflections go the way you think they will play out. From public outbursts to even placing the judge at risk, we'll take a deep look at some of the courtroom's scariest moments.
I'm going to sign and approve these media requests. They are not for live streaming, and they are only for any sort of media that the media requested.
Deobra Redden. In a shocking courtroom showdown, Deobra Redden, a 3-time felon, made headlines when he attacked Judge Mary Kay Huss after his sentencing. On January 3, 2024, Redden was at Clark County District Court in Las Vegas, Nevada, to hear his fate regarding a charge of attempted battery with substantial bodily harm. Already facing a long history of criminal activity, Redden had been in front of Judge Huss before. His recent charges included malicious destruction of property, and he had a bench warrant issued for missing a December court date.
To make it clear that I am not changing or modifying the sentence I was in the process of imposing last week before I was interrupted by defendant's actions.
Redden's defense attorney pleaded for probation, with Redden himself asking for leniency. He stood in front of Judge Huss, claiming that, based on his history, he feels like he shouldn't be sent to prison again. But Judge Huss, seeing through the excuses, decided it was time for a tougher sentence. "I think it's time you get a taste of something else," she told him, preparing to deliver a prison term. However, Redden was far from ready to accept his fate. In a startling move, he leaped over the courtroom bench, transforming the scene into total chaos. Within seconds, he was lunging toward Judge Huss, throwing punches and kicking furiously. The courtroom filled with gasps as the shocked judge and onlookers witnessed Redden's frenzied attack. Security personnel and court officials sprang into action, rushing to stop him. The ensuing struggle was intense, with guards battling to restrain Redden as he swung and kicked, fiercely resisting their efforts. Bodies collided, punches flew, and the quiet courtroom was now a full-blown battleground. Redden's violent outburst shook everyone as he fought to escape his sentence. Eventually, the guards managed to pull him away, securing Judge Huss, who, though shaken, stood her ground. But the story didn't end there. Just a week later, Redden was back in court, this time facing even more severe charges, including attempted murder and multiple counts of battery. The surprising twist is that he stood before the same judge he had attacked. This time, however, there was no leniency, no more chances. Redden's reckless actions earned him a sentence of 19 to 48 months in prison.
When we were last here, arguments were concluded and the court had begun to pronounce sentence when an incident occurred, an incident initiated by Mr. Redden, preventing the court from completing sentencing.
Deobra Redden's courtroom rampage revealed a shocking level of defiance, and his reckless assault on a judge exposed the extreme lengths he was willing to go to avoid prison. Ultimately, the attack only solidified his fate, sealing his place behind bars for years to come. But we assure you that compared to the next court case, this case was nothing.
We further find this offense is a dangerous felony because the offense involved the discharge, use, or threatening exhibition of fire, a deadly weapon, or dangerous instrument.
Michael Marin. On the 28th of June 2022, Michael Marin did the unthinkable right in the middle of his court proceedings, right in the Maricopa County Superior Court in Arizona. A shocking scene unfolded as Michael Marin, an American financier, lawyer, former Wall Street trader, and millionaire, met a tragic end in front of everyone present. Marin was well known for his opulent lifestyle. At the height of his success, he owned a multi-million-dollar mansion in Arizona's upscale Biltmore Estates neighborhood, and his art collection included pieces by Picasso. However, in July 2009, his luxury home was engulfed in flames. Authorities soon discovered that Marin had set the fire himself, a desperate act spurred by his financial troubles. Unable to keep up with his mortgage payments and facing failed plans to raffle off the house for charity, Marin turned to arson and fraud, hoping to cash in on his homeowner's insurance.
Find the defendant, Michael James Marin, guilty of arson of an occupied structure.
This plan unraveled, and Marin faced serious charges of arson and insurance fraud. If convicted, he would likely spend 7 to 21 years behind bars. His court hearings began on May 21st, 2012, marking the start of a legal saga that would end in a way no one could have predicted. On the day of the verdict, the jury delivered their decision. They found Marin guilty of arson. The court clerk read aloud, "We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn in the above entitled action, upon our oaths, do find the defendant, Michael James Marin, guilty of arson of an occupied structure." The courtroom filled with a heavy silence as Marin absorbed the news. Then things took a chilling turn. Marin, visibly shaken, placed his hands over his face, closed his eyes, and appeared to slip something into his mouth. He quickly washed it down with a drink from a small bottle. Moments later, he started to convulse and collapsed onto the floor. Witnesses watched in shock as chaos broke out in the courtroom, with emergency responders rushing to aid. Despite efforts to save him, Marin was pronounced dead by the time he arrived at the hospital. Later, it was confirmed that he had ingested a lethal dose of cyanide, a final, irreversible act in response to the verdict. Michael's incident can be described as a means to avoid the suffering in jail, but some criminals' behavior just have no justification. Christopher Teal. In courtrooms, it could be said that some defendants display such strange behavior that it defies logic.
That they are now stipulating that Mr. Teal.
Christopher Teal, 26, is one of these cases. Teal stands in King County, Seattle, before Superior Judge Karen Donahue. He's charged with rape and unlawful imprisonment after a shocking incident at a car dealership. The attack happened after the victim dropped her car off for servicing. Teal followed her into the bathroom, locked her in a stall, and then assaulted her. Fortunately, dealership staff intervened just in time, breaking into the stall and pulling Teal, standing at 6 feet 3 inches and weighing 250 pounds, away from the terrified woman. Since his arrest, Teal's behavior has only grown more concerning, involving violent outbursts, including an attempt to headbutt a detective, questioning him about the assault.
I'd like to know where the they got that photo of me with my short hair, because that was on Facebook and I don't have a Facebook.
All right.
A psychiatric evaluation was conducted, and the results showed he understood the charges against him. The psychologist suspected that Teal might be exaggerating or faking signs of a mental disorder. Now he is back in court for a competency hearing. As the hearing begins, Teal stands next to his court-appointed attorney, Reed Birkland, who looks tense. Teal's handcuffs are removed by the guard, and he appears dazed, scanning the room with a vacant look. Suddenly, as the prosecutor begins, Teal reaches out towards his attorney, prompting a court officer to restrain his arm and instruct him to stand still. Then, without any warning, Teal lets out a strange laugh, turns toward Birkland, and slaps him sharply. This bizarre act stuns everyone. One court officer quickly grabs Teal's head, while another secures him by the shoulders, forcing him to the ground. They struggle to control him, eventually getting his handcuffs back on. Another officer calls for a restraint chair, but there isn't one readily available. Instead, they place a spit hood over Teal's head and lead him out of the courtroom. Although Birkland decides not to press charges for the slap, he removes himself from the case, unwilling to represent Teal any longer. Yet Teal's strange courtroom antics don't stop here. 2 weeks later, he's back for another competency hearing. This time, officers aren't taking any risks. They bring him strapped to a restraint chair, hoping to avoid any further disruptions. The hearing begins, but Teal can't keep quiet. Out of nowhere, he loudly complains about his mugshot, fixating on his hair length. "Where did they get that photo of me with short hair?" he demands, adding, "That was on Facebook, and I don't even have a Facebook." The attorney tries to refocus the hearing, but Teal keeps going, shouting questions about whether the authorities have access to Google.
So, Your Honor, legitimate question. Like, do they have access to Google?
After his disruptive behavior in court, Teal is ultimately declared competent to stand trial. Once the trial wraps up, he's found guilty and sentenced to 8.5 years to life for his crimes. In the end, Christopher Teal's case shows just how challenging some defendants can be for attorneys and court staff, who often have to deal with outrageous behavior that stretches their patience and resources to the limit. Teal's behavior was unexplainable, but the next convict was willing to have his freedom at all cost. Daniel Nicholson. The court had seen its fair share of dramatic moments, but this day would be one for the records. Nicholson's wild, desperate attempt to evade the law was as intense as it was futile, showing just how far some will go, even with the odds stacked firmly against them. Daniel Nicholson's chaotic attempt to escape justice is something out of a movie. At 35 years old, he's at the Christie's Beach Magistrates Court in Adelaide, South Australia, facing a bail hearing for weapons and driving offenses. Nicholson has a rough history with petty crimes and drug use, and just before appearing in court, he got high on methamphetamines. As Magistrate Sue O'Connor announces that his bail is being revoked, Nicholson's shock and desperation kick in. He jumps up, raising his hands in a frantic plea, clearly not prepared for this outcome. He expected another release on bail, but the court had different plans. The judge firmly orders him to sit down, but Nicholson, drugged and distressed, only grows more agitated. A sheriff's officer steps in, hoping to calm him down, but the situation quickly spirals. In an astonishing move, Nicholson tries to climb over the dock's glass panel, sparking a wild struggle with the officers. Two officers grab him, trying to restrain him, but he wrestles one of them, pulling his arm back as he stumbles back into the dock. Not one to give up easily, Nicholson springs up again with a sudden burst of energy, vaulting back over the dock. He lands hard on a nearby desk, but before he can make any more moves, a police prosecutor tackles him, trying to bring him under control. In the middle of this wild scuffle, Nicholson's pants slip down, exposing him in a scene that could have been comedic if it weren't so intense. But Nicholson is undeterred, fighting with seemingly boundless energy as he tries to break free across the courtroom floor. Then it gets even more chaotic. Supporters of Nicholson, who had been waiting in the hallway outside, hear the commotion and rush into the courtroom. Among them is a woman carrying Nicholson's young son in her arms. She cries out to the guards, pleading for mercy, insisting that Nicholson is a sick man. Her voice echoes through the tense courtroom, adding another layer of drama to the scene. Meanwhile, the officers keep struggling to control Nicholson, who fights like he has superhuman strength. Eventually, they manage to restrain him, placing him in handcuffs. The aftermath leaves two sheriff's officers with injuries, evidence of just how intense the struggle was. Nicholson's court escapade ends with him being sentenced to at least 12 months in jail for his attempted escape. The judge delivers a final message, telling him to grow up, get clean, or face many more years behind bars.
What's going on, Pop?
Take a seat. Take a seat.
Miss, please, miss.
Please, miss. I'll tell you what please, miss
No.
Nicholson's case is explainable, but the next has got me thinking, how violent must someone be to be locked up in a glass tank for trial?
Ну а что, должен зарезать ее, убить или как?
Нет, избавиться от сомнений.
От каких сомнений?
В себе.
Leonid Greiser. Leonid, an 18-year-old on trial in Russia for the murder of his sister, Ariana Karol, faced his day in court in a bizarre scene that stunned everyone present. Greiser, who confessed to the brutal stabbing and claimed Satan had ordered him to do it, was confined in a secure glass box at Sherbinsky District Court in Moscow to protect the courtroom staff and public. The trial begins, and Greiser approaches the narrow panel opening of the glass box, exchanging a few quiet words with the guard. Then something shifts in his eyes. A wild idea seems to spark. Without warning, Greiser stoops down and wedges his hands through the small horizontal window, gripping its edges and attempts to pull his upper body through. But he quickly realizes his head won't fit, so he pivots to plan B, trying to exit feet first. Swinging his right leg through the window, Greiser makes a bold move move to escape. A female guard jumps into action, reaching through the window to grab his leg, but Greiser swiftly retreats to the center of the box, just out of reach. Pausing, he looks upward, as if calculating his next move, eyeing the ceiling of the glass cage. The male guard steps forward, attempting to calm him down by calling him back toward the access window. For a brief moment, Greiser seems to settle. But just as things start to calm down, he suddenly jumps onto the bench inside the box. With astonishing agility, Greiser wedges his body upward, squeezing through a narrow gap between the ceiling slats. The guards, at first caught off guard, watch as Greiser pulls himself higher, his legs anchored on either side of the box. But as his head pokes through a styrofoam ceiling tile, they realize he's close to escaping and spring into action. 3 officers rush over, trying to climb up to grab him. 2 of them seize his legs and pull, while a 3rd officer strikes him with a baton to try to halt his progress. But Greiser, fueled by adrenaline, wriggles fiercely, so much so that his pants slip off, leaving one guard holding them while he continues to ascend. As he struggles free, more guards arrive, and one brandishes a taser, aiming it at his leg. Greiser, nervous about getting tased, hesitates. In a final act, Greiser knocks loose 2 more ceiling tiles, pushing through wires and debris as he continues pleading with the guard to hold back the taser. With guards surrounding him and his options limited, he eventually climbs back down, bringing a mess of broken tiles and tangled wires with him. Re-entering the glass box, he pulls his pants back on, and the hearing resumes, this time with him securely handcuffed to prevent any more escape attempts. In the end, Greiser was found guilty of his sister's murder and sentenced to mandatory psychiatric treatment. Despite the courtroom spectacle, he showed no remorse, telling the court he didn't regret what he did. His wild and desperate actions may have shocked the courtroom, but ultimately, they only led him back into confinement, reinforcing the gravity of his crime. If you think that Greiser's aura was bad, then let me tell you about Joseph Zier, who threw the court upside down.
In the Circuit Court of the 20th Judicial Circuit in and for Lee County, Florida, criminal action, State of Florida versus Joseph Adam Zeiler, case number 16 CF 455, verdict.
Joseph Zier. Joseph managed to evade justice for years after the shocking 1990 murder of a child and her babysitter. This gruesome crime, where both victims were sexually assaulted and suffocated, left an entire community haunted, while Zier seemed to disappear without a trace. But in 2016, after an arrest on an unrelated assault charge, police finally found a match between Zier's DNA and the unsolved murder of 11-year-old Robin Cornell and her babysitter, 32-year-old Lisa Story. Despite finally facing the consequences, Zier's behavior in court was as disturbing as his crime. Flash forward to the 20th Judicial Circuit Court in Lee County, Florida. In June 2023, Zier is back in court, prepared for sentencing on first-degree murder charges. The jury had already recommended the death penalty, and all eyes were on the courtroom, waiting for justice to finally be served. Shackled and surrounded by officers, the 60-year-old Zier seemed resigned, but what happened next shocked everyone. As Zier sat in the courtroom, he called his defense attorney, Kevin Shirley, over. Shirley, assuming Zier wanted to whisper something, leaned in close. Without warning, Zier swung his elbow up, delivering a brutal hit to the side of his attorney's head. The blow was so sudden and violent that it took a moment for those watching to react. In seconds, 2 bailiffs tackled Zier to the ground, restraining him before he could do any more damage. This violent outburst wasn't the only sign of Zier's cold indifference. Throughout his trial, he'd shown zero remorse, answering questions with unsettling arrogance. When asked if he felt any regret for the brutal murders, he responded bluntly, "Absolutely not. I have nothing to feel remorseful for." He even claimed that he had been romantically involved with Robin's mother, Jan Cornell, just months before the murders, a claim that only added to the pain of the grieving family. The 1990 murders had devastated the family and the entire community of Cape Coral. Jan Cornell Robin's mother, had trusted Lisa's story to babysit her daughter that night. But when she returned the next morning, she walked into a nightmare. The horror of losing her daughter and friend without answers tormented her for 26 long years. Only in 2016 did her plea for justice get an answer when Zaire's DNA confirmed him as the murderer. Back in the courtroom, as the dust settled after his outburst, Zaire finally heard his sentence. For each murder, he was handed a separate death sentence, a penalty that matched the gravity of his crimes and the pain he caused. The judge's words brought some relief, knowing Zaire would never hurt anyone again, but they couldn't erase the sorrow of the past 3 decades. In the end, Joseph Zaire's attempts to evade justice came to a close. His cruelty laid bare for all to see. His final violent act in the courtroom was just another reminder of the heartlessness that led him to commit such terrible crimes. Finally, justice had the last word, bringing an end to a case that had left scars on so many lives. If you think that Zaire Insane Ready In was the only one, then you're wrong. The next convict's reaction was maybe even worse.
And he went in there and this was gonna take her home. I was just offended by this. I'm just offended that he asked me to do that.
Monica Contreras. In what should have been a safe and lawful environment, Monica Contreras faced a nightmare. During an August 2011 hearing at Clark County Family Court in Nevada, Contreras brought her 2-year-old daughter, expecting a routine procedure regarding her divorce. Overseeing the case was hearing master Patricia Doninger, who quickly finalized the proceedings. So I'm just going to close the case out and dissolve the order.
So I'm just going to close the case out and dissolve the order.
All right, thank you.
Contreras thought she was free to go, but her day was about to take a dark turn. Out of nowhere, Court Marshal Ron Fox approached, instructing her to accompany him to a separate room for a drug search. Hesitantly, she followed, leaving her young daughter with the hearing master. But what happened next was not a search for drugs. Fox asked her to lift her shirt in a deeply uncomfortable and invasive manner. When Contreras questioned his actions, saying she felt offended, the marshal didn't stop. Instead, he continued his troubling behavior, ignoring her discomfort and any protocol requiring a female chaperone. The situation spiraled further as Contreras continued to protest, leading Fox to abruptly announce that she was being arrested for making false allegations against a police officer. Coldly, he ordered her to be brought in. Shocked and fearful, Contreras asked why she would be arrested for that, but received no clear answer, only a chilling explanation that her claims about Fox's actions had put her in trouble.
He said, can I just have you pull up your shirt and show me that there's no drugs in there?
Even worse, hearing Master Doninger, who knew what was happening, did nothing to protect Contreras. Instead, she sided with the marshal, allowing the arrest to proceed. In an attempt to force Contreras into silence, they used her daughter as leverage, threatening to separate the two unless she retracted her statements. Desperate and terrified, Contreras pleaded, "Please, I just want to end this." Reluctantly, she tried to take back her claims, but the damage was done. As Contreras stood, handcuffed and devastated, she directed her anger at Doninger. "How could you do this to me? You let him do this, and I was just trying to defend myself." Her pleas were ignored, and Contreras was led to jail, formally charged with providing false information to a police officer and disturbing the peace. But Contreras didn't let the story end there. On April 5th, 2013, she filed a federal lawsuit against Marshal Fox, Doninger, Clark County, and the state of Nevada. The legal battle revealed that similar incidents had occurred but had never been reported to Internal Affairs. In 2014, Nevada settled the case, awarding Contreras $200,000.
To lift up my shirt without a witness.
Okay.
You asked me to lift my shirt without a witness.
This terrifying incident remains a chilling reminder of how those in authority can misuse their power. Monica Contreras' courage in fighting back and exposing the truth underscores a powerful message. Even in the darkest of times, standing up for justice matters. And that's not all. Jeremy Christian took courtroom chaos to a new level when he cursed and even threatened his victim.
"Liar! You're not the only black person on Max, liar!"
Jeremy Christian, this notorious white supremacist, would be remembered not only for taking 2 lives in a racially charged attack, but also for his shocking lack of remorse as he hurled insults during the sentencing hearing. Witness this chilling moment unfold at the Multnomah County Circuit Court. Christian's dark side came to light on May 26, 2017, on Portland's Max Light Rail. That day, he launched into a vile, anti-Muslim rant targeting 2 young women, one black, the other wearing a hijab. As Christian's words grew more hateful, the frightened teens moved to the back of the train. Seeing the disturbing scene, 3 brave bystanders, Talisan Murdin Namkai Meche, Micah David Cole Fletcher, and Ricky Best, stepped in to try to calm him down. But Christian's rage exploded into deadly violence. Within seconds, Christian pulled out a knife and attacked. Namkai Meche and Best were fatally stabbed, while Fletcher sustained serious injuries. Even as the train passengers tried to help the injured, Christian fled the scene, leaving a trail of horror and heartbreak behind. Police soon caught him, but he showed no regret, maintaining his hateful views and even gloating during his trial. Charged with first-degree murder, attempted murder, and hate crimes, Christian's behavior in court shocked everyone. Throughout the trial, Christian continued to stir the tension, shouting insults and mocking witnesses. He yelled slogans like "Liar, liar, you're not the only black person on the max," and "Free speech or die, Portland," disrupting proceedings whenever he could. The courtroom became a tense, hostile environment, with Christian determined to provoke anger. Then, on June 24th, 2020, during his sentencing, the situation reached its peak. As one of the survivors tearfully read her victim impact statement, Christian erupted again, shouting that he regretted not killing her. He was screaming that he should have killed them all at the top of his voice, and that made the courtroom tremble with his rage. Security quickly intervened, escorting him out as the tense silence settled over those present. In the end, despite his violent outbursts and disturbing remarks, justice prevailed. Jeremy Christian was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms plus an additional 51.5 years for his crimes. This sentence served as a powerful reminder that hateful actions come with consequences, no matter how defiantly they are defended. Christian's case left a scar on Portland, but it also underscored the bravery of those who stepped in to protect others from senseless hate. Jeremy Christian's behavior in court was mind-blowing, but Spencer Boston is about to blow your mind even more.
Hey, we the people deserve better.
Spencer Boston. Spencer didn't just find himself in trouble for speeding and a small marijuana possession charge. He took things to an unforgettable level in court. Appearing before Judge Haywood Berry, Boston faced his charges with an unexpected twist. Dressed in a bright tie-dye shirt, he stepped up to the podium and even decided to represent himself, clearly wanting his voice heard. Boston believes strongly that marijuana laws were unfair, and he made that opinion clear. He expressed that he thinks that the marijuana law here is very unfair, expressing that the people deserve better. Judge Berry, although receptive to Boston's perspective, quickly redirected the conversation, steering Boston back to the hearing. The judge asked if Boston wanted to proceed with a trial, and after Boston agreed, Judge Berry turned to the court staff to start the legal process. But then Boston pulled an unexpected move. Reaching into his jacket, he pulled out a joint right in the courtroom and put it into his mouth, leaving everyone in shock. Court officers didn't catch on right away, making the moment even more surreal. Cameras captured the incident as Boston lit the joint, defying the courtroom's rules in a show of audacity that stunned everyone. Boston's act earned him an additional charge for disorderly conduct and contempt of court, along with a second possession charge. Later, Boston revealed in an interview that he'd actually taped the joint to his chest to sneak it past security. His bold courtroom protest led to a 10-day contempt sentence, after which he was released on a $3,000 bond. Spencer Boston's courtroom stunt was seen as disrespectful, yet it certainly left an impression on everyone present. It's a reminder that sometimes defendants go beyond simple legal disputes, bringing unforgettable, daring moves into the courtroom. Unlike Spencer, Dexter Johnson, the next convict, his behavior was rather violent than audacious. Dexter Johnson. Dexter's reaction after his death sentence turned the courtroom into pure chaos. At just 17, Johnson's violent actions and those of his gang left a trail of devastation, claiming 5 lives. Yet as his sentence was announced, his rage ignited, shattering the courtroom's calm. It all unfolds at Harris County Criminal Justice Center. On June 18, 2006, 23-year-old Maria Apariz and her 18-year-old boyfriend Huo Engo sat in her car talking. Suddenly, Johnson and an accomplice approached with a shotgun and pistol. Forcing the couple into the back seat, they drove through Houston, demanding cash, credit cards, and ATM pins. They didn't stop there. 2 more gang members joined in, escalating the threats and assaults. But robbing them wasn't enough. Johnson and his crew drove the couple to a secluded area where he brutally assaulted Apariz. Then, he coldly shot both her and Engo in the head, ending their lives in a horrific act of violence. Though Johnson's defense claimed another person led the couple into the woods and fired the fatal shots. This was just one of his many crimes. Johnson had been on a deadly crime spree before and after the double homicide. In May 2006, he killed a 60-year-old man at a car wash as the man was cleaning his barbecue pit. Shortly after, Johnson and a partner robbed 2 men at a payphone, killing one because he only had a roll of quarters. In the days that followed, another person was gunned down in a series of robberies led by Johnson's gang. Eventually, Johnson faced multiple charges, including capital murder and assault. The trial was intense, with Johnson's lawyers arguing he had intellectual disabilities and schizophrenia. However, the jury found him guilty of capital murder, and the judge delivered the sentence: death. Then, the unexpected happened. Johnson, the jury has found you guilty of capital murder. In accordance with Texas law, this court hereby sentences you to death. As these words echoed through the courtroom, Johnson erupted, leaping from his seat in a fury. The once quiet courtroom erupted into chaos as he appeared ready to attack, with tension soaring. The moment was gripping, and the scene spiraled into pandemonium, with court officers scrambling to regain control. Outside the courtroom, the turmoil didn't stop. A family member of Johnson collapsed, overcome by the shock and distress of the terrifying scene inside. Dexter Johnson's violent courtroom reaction matched the brutality of his crimes, showing his utter disregard for remorse. If you enjoyed these cases, then make sure to check out our next ones shown on screen.